Good afternoon, and welcome to the launch of the report and findings on the Improving Teacher Education in Sri Lanka project. This afternoon's session will last approximately an hour and will include the sharing of insights and a panel discussion. Please put all your questions and comments in the chat as the event progresses, and we will take those up and post them to the panel during the Q&A session after the panel discussion. To begin with, let me request Louise Coucher, Director, Education and English, to introduce the session. Louise?
Welcome, everybody. I know we're meeting in slightly unusual circumstances after the pandemic, COVID-19 and the lockdown. I hope you are all doing really, really well. And I'm delighted that we are able to come together today. Now, the British Council has been in Sri Lanka for 70 years, and during much of that time, we have worked in the field of teacher education. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce this event, looking at the impact of some of our education work. Over the last few years, we focused on our large-scale Transform programme, the aim of which is to ensure that all young people access learning opportunities provided by a fit-for-purpose and relevant education system that will allow them to fulfil their potential, achieve their aspirations, and contribute to Sri Lanka's economic and social development. The programme works in three key areas: professionalisation, quality assurance, and transitions. The report we'll be hearing about today is on our teacher education work, which sits firmly within our professionalisation strand. However, there is also a wider relevance right now, bearing in mind the need for a post-pandemic economic recovery. And looking at Sri Lanka's economy, key areas are obviously the export market, labour migration, and the one we're all very familiar with, the tourism sector. English is absolutely a key skill for young people to acquire as they look to enter the workforce. Teachers, teacher educators, education professionals across the board, we all have a critical role to play in shaping the knowledge, skills and expertise of young people and their future employability, and, as I said earlier, allowing them to fulfill their potential and achieve their personal aspirations. So the work we do is absolutely critical in contributing to supporting not only the young people in the country, but also the country's wider economic recovery. Now, before handing over to our panelists, our speakers, I would just like to remind everyone that the report that is being introduced is on the British Council's website. Please do look, read, and hopefully enjoy. In addition, at the end of today's event, there will be a feedback quiz. The link will be put into the comments section at the end, and I will also add that a participation certificate will be available to participants who complete the questionnaire. And as Mrinali mentioned, there will be Q&A time after the panels have shared their thoughts and insights. So please do post all of your questions and comments on the chat. Please do bring up questions and comments you may have on any aspect of the report, why you may feel that the report is significant, and please share your thoughts on how you feel the report will drive forward the agenda and conversation on teacher professionalism, professionalisation, English, and the future of young people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Louise, for your welcome and introduction. Improving Teacher Education in Sri Lanka, more commonly known as ITESL, started in 2017 and continues today. It's a strand of the much larger Transform Education Reform Programme which is run in partnership with the Ministry of Education. Under the Transform umbrella, the ITESL project has two target audiences and aims. Firstly, it aims to train master trainers in both the pre and the in-service state education sectors, and then deploy these master trainers to deliver, firstly, teacher-educator courses to teacher educators at pre-service teacher training institutions, and secondly, mentoring and methodology courses to in-service advisors who work with the in-service teachers. Additionally, it aims to train master trainers to train school principals in school leadership skills. Working together across both strands, as the training cascades down to the pre-service and in-service teachers, more participatory approaches will be embedded in the country's education system, and this should be supported and facilitated by skilled and knowledgeable school principals. In the pre-service sector, the project has trained 25 master trainers who then trained over 100 teacher educators. In the in-service sector, it trained 25 master trainers who trained 175 in-service advisors and 100 senior teachers who then trained over 5,000 teachers. The training focused on ELT methodology and mentoring skills, both aiming at a much more student-centred approach in the classroom. The project has been running now for 3 years. We have had training centres in Mannar, Kandy, Yakarabata and Kalutara. The project is now moving into a new phase, focusing on developing and assessing speaking and listening skills and on improving English language teacher proficiency levels. So it's now time to reflect on the last 3 years and evaluate the project's impact so far. The brief of the independent consultant and author of the report being launched here today, Dr. Deborah Wyburn, was to measure the project's progress against its original log frame and to draw implications and make recommendations for the future of the project and the wider education system. Deborah has a long history of working in education in Sri Lanka, and I'd like to now hand over to Deborah, who is going to take us through the report's findings.
Thank you, Leslie. As Leslie mentioned, I'm here to present the report of the evaluation that I did of ITESL. And I'd like to also mention that I also did an evaluation earlier of the T program. So Shamil, if you can put the PowerPoint up. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the T program was an earlier evaluation that I did. It was basically setting the foundations in a way for the ITESL program, but it was a program that was built on external consultants coming in, British Council consultants, who demonstrated best practice in the teacher training institutes. Of course, that's not a sustainable approach, so hence the ITESL program was created in order to be able to transfer those skills and to have that happening in a sustainable way into the future. Now, as Leslie mentioned, the ITESL program is a multi-component project or program, and each of these components were part of the evaluation. So we have what's happening in the pre-service training, we have what's happening with training of ISAs, in-service training, and also a massive program of training teachers in schools, together with training for the principals and the ADEs. Leslie also mentioned that there was a program logic that this evaluation was based on, and primarily the evaluation looks at the output level. So it was essentially evaluating the impact of the training, the immediate impact of the training, which doesn't mean to say it didn't look at what was happening in teacher training institutes or in classrooms. It did, but of course, any program needs to be evaluated also for sustainability. whether these practices that we can see initially were sustained into the future, and that's one of the main recommendations of the evaluation study to the ministry, to actually look at whether these practices that we saw happening immediately after the training are being sustained in teacher training institutes and in schools. Leslie also mentioned that a cascade model had been used. So for the pre-service training component, teacher educators were joined together in a master training program. Those master trainers then were responsible for training other teacher educators. I was very fortunate in being able to look at, or to be able to draw upon, a range of data that the ITESL consultants had already collected before I came along. Very comprehensive range. So we had pre and post observation within the training program. So observation of micro training at the beginning of the training, at the end of the training, and also when the participants went back to their own institutions. Self-assessment of what they thought their competency level was at the beginning and the end of the training. So this is more or less a measure of confidence. And in terms of the master teacher training, the first stage of the cascade training for pre-service education, all observations, all pre and post differences were found to be statistically significant. There's a little square up here that mentions a sort of statistical test that I did for each of these components. I'm not going to dwell on this. If anyone has any questions to ask, please feel free to either ask in the chat or follow up with me later. So when I say that just about every finding at every level of the ITESL evaluation was statistically significant, of course, that only means that the findings, it was extremely unlikely that the difference between pre and post observations or pre and post quiz scores could have been due entirely to chance. That's what statistical significance means. It doesn't talk about how substantial the change was. When we look at how substantial the change was with the master teacher training, we found that as a result of the immediate training course, most of the participants developed from a level of 2, which is termed developing, to a level of 3, doing well on the observed competencies. But then after actually joining the ITESL consultants to present, to co-facilitate the workshops for other teacher educators, many of them actually improved to a level of 4 mastering on at least half of the 16 competencies that were observed. If you're interested in the competencies that were observed, all of the instruments, of course, are included in the report. So these master trainers then presented 3 phases of tech training, tech teacher education course, where, as I said, other teacher educators were trained. At every stage, masses of data to draw on, so I won't go into this again, but just to draw your attention to what I think are the really interesting findings from an analysis of that data. Firstly, that the skill levels were maintained on return to the institution. So as part of the tech training, each of the participants committed to what was called a certificate of practice. Under the certificate of practice, when they went back to their institutions, they would work with either T trainers who were still in place, or the master trainers, or even ITESL consultants, to observe classes that they were presenting, and also to work with them to develop their own lesson plans and to have their own lessons observed. And it was the ratings of their own lessons that we drew on to make this conclusion, that in fact the skill levels were maintained on return to the institution. The effect size, when I mentioned before that statistical significance just means that the results could not be attributed just to chance, but we need to look at how substantial the change was. The usual measure that you talk about is effect size. So the effect size, one of the highest effect size we found was in the area of observation and feedback. So things like taking notes for feedback, questioning skills, giving constructive feedback. Now, all of these skills are related to supervision of teaching practice. So if you're a teaching educator, it means what you're doing in observing trainees in their teaching practice block or in the internship year. There was also a component of subject tech training, which was meant to target teachers of math, science, and IT. That got wound back, I believe, because of budget constraints. But so I won't talk about it at length. However, I just want to draw your attention to this finding, that the effect size for this training was even higher than that for the English tech training. So those few participants that were reached really benefited from the program. So there's huge potential there if that could be introduced at a bigger scale later on. Okay, so that's pre-service training. We're now looking at what's happening with ISAs. ISAs participated, as Leslie said, in 2 rounds of training. One was about mentoring, one was about ELT methodology. And the purpose of the ELT methodology was to allow them to continue to support the trainees who had been trained in more learner-centered, interactive approaches, to support them when they go out to the school, because they themselves are versed in those techniques. The ISA training, again, a cascade model. So if we have a look at the results, once again, differences statistically significant. I think for me, the most interesting part of these findings was that the most substantial difference happened when you look at what occurred with the master trainers. These are ISA master trainers in this particular case. As they went through the program of being trained and then co-facilitating with the ITESL consultants, there was a substantial growth there in competence level and also in confidence level. So if we look at the graphs for this, we can see here, if you compare baseline, now baseline means observed skills at the start of the training, and after a program of co-facilitating workshops with ITESL consultants, you can immediately observe substantial change happening here in observed competencies. So many of them going up to, this was a measure of how many were rated at 4 mastering at each time, baseline and after they had co-facilitated workshops. So observations and also self-assessment. So their confidence also dramatically increased. The next phase, of course, was training for ADEs, because the ISAs would need to be supported by their ADEs in the zonal office. This was, of course, always, as I said, all of the findings were statistically significant, but some of the end of course scores were still very low, so points to potential for further work with the ADEs. I think that this, from what I have seen, it can be attributed to the diversity of the job that is done, of the people who are involved in doing the work. So quite challenging to present a common course to those people. And finally, looking at training, a very ambitious program to train 10,000 teachers, serving in-service teachers, with an 18-hour course, basically focusing on some of the skills that were part of the tech training and the ITESL program generally. So 10,000 was the target. They didn't reach the target, but I believe that that's going to happen in a further phase. Now, this was it was only a 3-day training, so 18-hour course. It had to be particularly targeted. And I understand there was a program where to target what serving teachers really needed to concentrate on, to become aware of, and to use new approaches in. This was determined through a series of focus groups, based on the experience of the ITESL consultants over the previous couple of years of presenting the program, and also in consultation with their master trainers. So the content basically looked at teaching reading and grammar, communicatively, and using activities to maximize participation. Again, statistically significant pre and post. But for me, the interesting part here, well, there's actually quite a few interesting parts to this. Firstly, that it proved the potential to use technology for this sort of these sort of findings. So to start with, there was a pre and post quiz for the teachers who were participating in the training, and that was done on smartphones. Not all of them had smartphones, some of them had to borrow them, but they were all capable of doing this. Then the ISAs who were presenting the course went out and observed teachers in their classrooms. So this is, I guess, like the equivalent of the certificate of practice, but for teachers. And not only did they observe teachers in the classroom, they also observed teachers who had not participated in this first phase of the CPLD training. And the differences were substantial. Just to pick out a few, when they looked at teachers who had not participated, so I guess you call them control group, none of those teachers who had not participated in the training used speaking in a post-reading activity, compared to almost 40% of teachers who had participated. Again, with grammar practice activities that involve speaking, control group, people who hadn't benefited from the training, only 7% of them used speaking. Whereas trained teachers, 46% of CPLD trained teachers used grammar practice activities that involve speaking. About the only non-significant difference that we found was in the teaching of the grammatical form. And there, it seems that all teachers teach the grammatical form. So I'd just like to end with this final graph, because I think it very clearly shows the potential impact of a very short-term course for teachers if it is targeted. So here we have pre-test scores on the pre and post quiz and post-test scores. And you're looking at the green, the dark blue and the brown, because green is 61 to 70%, going up to 80 to 90% for the brown. This part of the graph, not a lot of green, blue and brown. By the end of the training, quite a bit. So statistically significant result, also quite a substantial result. Thank you very much. Shamil, over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Deborah. We now invite the panel online for the next part of the program. You have just heard from our first panelist, Dr. Deborah Wyburn, an independent consultant in the field of education. We also have Mr. Sanath Jailath, Deputy Director, English and Foreign Languages Branch, Ministry of Education. Dr. Darshana Samaravira, Deputy Director, General Faculty of Languages, Humanities and Social Sciences. And the discussion will be moderated by Leslie Dick, Manager, English Language Training Projects, British Council.
Thank you, Manrali. I'll just say a few words about the structure of the panel discussion. I'm going to introduce some of the report findings and implications it raises, and then ask each panelist to comment in turn on a particular aspect of it. As we have only 30 minutes, each panelist will get a maximum of 2 minutes to respond, and I will warn you, I will put on my teacher trainer hat and step in and stop you if you go over time. Okay, so let's start. Okay. One of the main aims of the project was to move teacher education away from a lecture style of delivery and towards a delivery that modelled best practice, a move from trainer-centred delivery to trainee-centred delivery. The elements of the training provided under ITESL included, amongst other skills, lesson planning, training delivery, and role modelling, to provide trainees with an effective model in the expectation that they would teach in the way that they themselves were taught. So can I start with Deborah? Can I ask Deborah to comment on how successful the project was at doing this?
Okay, well, I think that what we need to look at there is the observation of classroom practice when the teacher educators initially went back to their own institutions, and it was fairly obvious from the results that they were able to translate the skills and knowledge that they gained through the training to their own classrooms. Again, with the PPLDT, the observations that the MSAs made in the that teachers were able to use those new skills effectively within their own classrooms. I think, of course, I mentioned earlier that it would be good for the ministry to look at whether those practices are sustained. And of course, that's what we hope, having put this put ITESL into operation, to actually see that those practices are sustained both in the teacher training institutes and in schools, so that they continue with those learner-centered and interactive practices over time.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Can I now ask Sana to comment on what needs to happen now to ensure that the teachers and trainers who were part of ITESL get the support from the system in the in-service sector to deliver in this much more student or trainee-centred way?
Yes, thank you, Leslie. And first I must thank Deborah for a very comprehensive report, which we studied very well. I hope everybody studied it, and in the ministry we have distributed it to our seniors. And very welcome your good analysis, statistical analysis. Now, what we expect in the system, from the system, if you highlight what you highlighted in the question, we expected our initial experience when visiting the schools, for example, the supervisions, was that we expected a very substantial change in terms of delivery, plus the teachers' attitudes, and when it comes to ISS, their mentoring skills. So we conducted a series of training in terms of mentoring plus training for the ISS and these NCOI lecturers. And now I have noted down a few points that we should highlight. The monitoring and evaluation of the program is the most significant thing, to my understanding, to support the trainers and ISS who are in the system. So unfortunately, this year we couldn't. We were planning to do it in parallel to CPLDT program that we are running on a special budget from the Treasury. For the Treasury, we got a special request to monitor and send them a report as well, and we submitted last year the same report. So this monitoring and evaluation is very important, providing the feedback and giving them the support to continue. The best practices that they have learned, they have gained through the consultants and in participating in the group work, which I also have observed. And other most important thing is that all the NCOE lecturers plus ISA must very carefully follow the instructions with talking to the teachers and giving them the instructions. For example, at the beginning of this year, we were able to visit a couple of schools and found that some of the CPLDT trainers who were trained were doing very well. And their approach, their attitude to the training, CPLDT training was very well. And that is mainly because they have received from the system a very good support. Mainly our trainers, mainly the ISAs and the regional English support center trainers, so who were trained on ITESL have done a good job. So we need to capitalize this and go ahead. And yes, so I think as Deborah starts Deborah starts our report, that if we teach children the way that we teach them yesterday, we rob their future. So we must keep it in mind. What I feel is, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay.
Over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, Sanat. Okay, can I now ask Darshna to comment on what needs to happen now in teacher training institutions to ensure that the trainees coming out of colleges and into schools get the support they need to deliver in this much more student-centred way? Darshana. Have we got Darshana?
Yeah, and thank you, British Council, for support, because this goes back to, yeah. Collaboration goes back to this wonderful collaboration. When it comes to the teacher training institutes in Sri Lanka, I think you have covered most of the teacher training institutes, and we have our trainers from all the teacher training institutes coming into the project. And moment, the point of view of the National Institute of Education, what I have to say is that we are getting ready. So English language teaching is going to be a vital part of this curriculum reform. Basically, the students. So in that aspect, I think education, and we are leaders. So I'm very much sure my experience with the program is that you have given a lot of insight to our trainers and teachers. So now it is our National Institute of Education responsible for the sustainability. Started, you have the British Council has worked very closely with the Ministry of Education and all the teacher training institutes and National Institute of Education to make this, to take things forward, to have a close relationship with all of the teacher training institutes, and to see that these practices are sustained throughout. Very good these efforts.
Okay.
So, that's what
Thank you very much,
I
Darshana.
have to say.
You're having connection problems a little bit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay, moving on to another topic, one of which I think is very important is the observation process. Deborah talked a bit about the certificate of practice process that went on in the ITESL project. And for me, one of the most important findings of the report is the impact the full certificate of practice process had on the skills of the teacher educators. The study showed clearly the difference between the full certificate of practice process. By that, I mean 2 observations. It was a kind of cyclical process of observation, planning, delivering feedback, and then doing it again. So there was that process. And then there was a shorter certificate of practice process, which involved basically an isolated observation. And the difference between the 2 was quite significant. And this, for me, speaks to a need for an observation cycle to be an integral part of the culture of both teacher training institutions for teacher educators and of the culture of schools for teachers. So can I ask Deborah to explain just a little bit further what the results showed when you compared the results of the Teacher Educator Course 1 batch and the Teacher Educator Course 2 and 3 batches? Deborah.
Thanks, Leslie. Yes, there were 3 batches, as you mentioned, and the effect size, how substantial the difference was, a measure of how substantial the difference was much greater for the Tech 1 group than Tech 2 and Tech 3. Now, trying to understand why that might have happened when I was looking at the results. Okay, so Tech 1, for the average entry skill level on entry was slightly lower than the other two groups, but that didn't explain the difference. But when I looked at what had happened as part of their certificate of practice, as Leslie said, they had the advantage of being able to go back to their institutions and to have support as they transferred those skills that they got from the training into their own classrooms. So they were able to observe key trainers doing training, observe master trainers or ITESL consultants. They were able to get help whereas they worked through a lesson plan. They were able to present their own classes and to get feedback from that. And this was it was quite a substantial process. When we look at the observed skills, there was a classroom observation. So the change for them was much more substantial than for the other two tech groups. And that seemed to be the difference in the experience, that certificate of practice, the benefit that they had from an extended support when they got back to their institutions to be able to build their confidence and to actually apply what they'd learned in their own classrooms. Thanks, Leslie.
Okay, can I ask Sanat to comment on how the in-service advisors who have just, I think this week, been formalised as a cadre by Gazette can contribute to setting up a developmental CPD system in schools that could integrate the observation cycle. I think it's significant that SurveyMonkey used by the ISAs in the CPLDT for observation data was very straightforward, and perhaps it could be used as a tool for collecting observation data. Sanat.
Yeah. So actually, what we expect from our ISS is mainly to set up a CPD system and sort of a continuous mentoring and continuous contact with teachers in groups. So we have instructed our provincial directors to make use this ISS. Now they are fully they are given a very comprehensive training on mentoring. So they acknowledge that they haven't had that sort of a mentoring training, some of them during their whole career. So then this was a good change, and that's things that we expect from the positive side to develop teachers very closely. And now they are mostly familiar with the technology as well. Now, as you said, this SurveyMonkey, plus using emails and other sort of technology like WhatsApp. Now, due to this recent pandemic that we experienced, now most of the teachers, schools, students, school heads, they are well aware of how to use these WhatsApp groups and other sort of Zoom meetings. So I think now there is a new hope that we can give more insights to the IAS as to how they could monitor, how they could talk to their and connect to their teachers in groups, in divisions, and in zones, and set up this thing what they received as the COP that we have given them in a series of training, series of discussions. And we must thank again to our consultants, UK consultants, past those who are working here as trainers, for mobilizing training and mobilizing ISS for this purpose. So we from NIE, from the Darshana and his team, and from the ministry, we, Mrs. Veerasuriya and we, so we will be working with our provincial staff, that is provincial coordinators and provincial zonal coordinators, to mobilize these ISS. So then I hope we will have a very good, we can looking forward to a very good substantial change in the years to come. And so what we are now hoping to run in future will also connect to this. And I think, yeah, there will be a good CPD system that will, that's what our sincere hope that we can run. Yes. I think, I hope I gave you
Yes, no.
reasonable.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just trying to put my microphone back on, sorry. Yes, no, I totally agree, and the British Council will be there to help every step of the way with that whole process. Okay, moving on to Darshana, could you comment on how this kind of observation cycle could become part of teacher training courses and teacher training institutions post-training, both for trainees and for teacher educators? I know it's already there for trainees going out to schools, but maybe also for post courses and for teacher educators who are doing the training themselves. Thanks, Darshana. Thanks.
Yes, let's see. Now, as Sanat pointed out, of course, sharing best practices is very, very important at this point, because now we are facing the new normal situation. Right? The world is no longer uh, the world. So when it comes to whether it's pre-service, in service, or whatever, right? We have to face, we have to think of new situations, and we have to think of new strategies. So I see this community of the concept of community of practices as a very good proactive kind of an approach. We never expected that the world would be like this by the somehow or the other made certain proactive kind of intervention. So now the challenge is keeping this uh, at all levels. For example, when it comes to pre-service teacher education, we have our national colleges of education. I'm sure our colleagues from national colleges of education, they are ready for this challenge, because we don't know right at nothing is to the colleges. Still, we have to continue this practice. I'm sorry, I'm not. So I think bringing in new technology, especially empowering our colleagues, trainers at
Okay,
teachers for national
thank
colleges of education with technology is going to be the next challenge we have. Right
yes.
now, I think now we are facing this problem. I yes, there are many. Still, I think we'll be able to cope up with these challenges.
Okay. Thank you very much, Darshana. And you're actually linking on to my next topic. But I just need to tell people that at some point we couldn't see you, but we could hear you. It's just due to connection issues. It's a technical problem. Okay, moving on to my next question. I think two areas that link the report to the current and potentially post-COVID-19 scenario in Sri Lanka are the communities of practice and digital technology. The communities of practice were set up within a project with the aim of sustainability. They were an effort at sustaining best practice post-project. Although they initially took the form of face-to-face meetings with a core group of about 40 participants, the method that was used, which quickly became the main communication tool, was WhatsApp. During the courses, these groups were quite active, but post-course, the interest dwindled. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, all these groups quickly got back into action and became lively platforms for sharing information, materials, ideas, advice, and they are in fact thriving now. This is one example of how digital technology came into its own and became an incredibly valuable communication and networking tool. Other examples are SurveyMonkey, Google Drive, The project introduced these to participants, built their confidence in using them, and when the pandemic hit, they were fully versed in some of them and not reluctant to try out new ones. So I'd like to ask the panel to comment on the communities of practice and the various uses of digital technology in the project and what their implications in a post-COVID-19 Sri Lanka might be. Basically, how could they be harnessed to further develop teacher education? Thank you. Deborah, so can I ask Deborah to put forward some possible ways communities of practice and digital technology could be used or developed? Deborah.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. So one thought I have is that in Sri Lanka, while the distances to travel may not be long, but certainly the length of time that it takes to actually physically travel somewhere to join a workshop can be quite substantial. And it means that sometimes people are excluded from the opportunity to participate in things like community of practice meetings. But if the technology is available, then the process becomes much more inclusive. So you have people teachers who are able to do training at the risks because they are actually able to do it. Or if they had to travel 2 hours after the school day in order to join a risk training, it wouldn't be possible. Again, you have teacher training institutes, some of them like the Jaffna, NCOE, very difficult for those people to really participate fully in communities of practice. But with technology, you can overcome that. Now, having said that, of course, the foundation needs to be there. And we've observed Dr. Darshana sometimes having difficulty joining this meeting from the NIE, which is in Colombo itself. And I think that's probably a bandwidth issue. So that points to a need to really establish a strong foundation so that the connectivity is inclusive in itself. So people, all NCOEs have the capability of joining meetings digitally, that all teachers in schools have to be able to access online materials and not to have to pay for them themselves, because that's sometimes a barrier. When I look at, so this is for communities of practice, when I look at what the ISAs were doing, I can see huge potential. They obviously mastered being able to make classroom observations and send back those ratings digitally without too many problems. So now, if they could do that continually and be able to put, those ratings that they're sending back were put into a database that they could draw on before they go out to visit that teacher again, it'd be very easy for them to track how that teacher's strengths had grown or where work continued and needs to be done continually. So I think at the moment with a paper-based system, it's sometimes difficult to be able to find the record and take it out when you've got so many teachers that you have to observe. But if you could just download it and take it with you, again, huge potential of technology to make their job easier and more effective, because basically they do need to have an ongoing dialogue with teachers about how their strengths are growing and where they need to work further. And the last time I came to see you were doing this, but I see now that you've done some work in this area. That sort of dialogue needs to be supported. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Okay, so can I move on to ask Sanat to talk about the possibility of MOE backing of communities of practice and the integration of digital technology to enhance in-service teacher education?
Yeah. Now, I think Leslie and myself, when we had meetings, we were always, Leslie was repeatedly asking me that what MOE can do to support our master trainers and teachers. Yes, the ministry is in this constant dialogue with the service providers and regulatory commission that how we can support. In fact, our last week, there was a meeting between ministry and the TCRL, that is the Telecommunication Regulatory Telecommunication Regulatory Commission, that how the ministry can support the teachers and the schools. So then there have been a lot of good results of these meetings. For example, the data bundles have been given for this Zoom and recognized 5 platforms on top of what you are doing at right now in a certain concessionary price. So apart from that, there will be a lot of equipment providing to the NCOEs. Now I am also sitting in a procurement committee where that we are purchasing a lot of equipment to the NCOEs, and now, for example, the Akarawata received the same equipment. So we are giving a lot of support to connect with the teachers and connect to the schools, and that kind for example, now we have installed a Moodle server in the ministry, and now for that ITESL, we have now started. Still, we have not put content that much, but I think we will be able to give it. Now, ITESL is completely free of charge right now, and this Moodle site will also be completely free of charge. If you access it from anywhere, that will be free of charge. So like that, a lot of support will be given for the teachers and the ISAs to access and connect with their groups that they are creating and working together. And most significant thing that we hope is, as I was telling earlier, this after the COVID-19, what schools experiencing is that they are now ready digitally. They are equipped. So from time to time, as Deborah says, there might be certain, for example, now I had to change my location today because I didn't have enough upload speed in my house when we come to the that kind of thing. So Darshana, for example, I know that NI, the technology is very good, but today something is experiencing. So this kind of things might happen, but I don't think we can, that will be hampered our systems, our discussions. So we can meet these problems, and we can hopefully go ahead with the coming years. So now we have requested from our budget a lot of support to digital empowerment of the schools and the further empowerment. Now we have been providing a lot of equipment. Some of them are outdated now, but there will be new equipment coming, like IQ boards and other equipment. So then I think there will be good support from the ministry will be there. So the teachers and then the ISS plus our NCOE lecturers, their challenge, their task is to make this equipment maximum and be very tech savvy and use them, integrate the technology into their work, and give these trainees in terms of NCOEs and teachers, students from the schools, this technology, and let them use them in their day-to-day work, in researching and finding information, going into the net. And so, I mean, just or a traditional teaching mode will be completely changed if we use it. And I think thanks to most of our new equipment, I mean, the training for using the equipment, this will be, yes, yeah, okay, thanks. I think I have
I think you're over there.
done justification to your question.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, we're running a bit over. Can I ask Darshana, though? You kind of responded to this, you brought in some of the answers to this question before. So can I ask you just to briefly comment on the possible integration of communities of practice into teacher training courses and how digital technology enhance pre-service teacher education?
Okay, yeah, let's see. I think now I'm clear to you. Actually, I happen to switch between connections. Now, as Dr. Deborah very correctly mentioned, now right here in Colombo, right, when we have this kind of problems, right, especially connectivity. Now, bringing digital technology and digital interventions into the training programs, of course, we have to very carefully scale down these things, because what I see is that we have to do a need analysis plus a resource analysis. Now, anything is possible if the resources are okay. There are certain now right at the moment I am facing a very unfortunate situation which I cannot control. So and we have to have alternatives ready. I think now if digital technology doesn't work, for example, internet. Now we have to think of
Yeah.
other means of reaching our colleagues, and especially, but I know when it comes to the community of practice, as you have mentioned now, for Google Forms and all sorts of digital platforms, it's very important that we have better connectivity. What I'm going to suggest is that it's better to have as many alternatives as possible to reach our colleagues and to enhance the practice. That's my suggestion.
Right, right. Thank you very much, Darshana. Thank you very much to everybody. I'm now going to hand over to Renali, who is going to look at the Q&A.
Hi everyone. We have an excellent question, and it's on sustainability. What would be done at policy level by the Minister of Education and NIE to ensure sustainability of these impacts? I hope you heard my question. I will repeat it. It says, what would be done at policy level by MOE and NIE to ensure sustainability of these impacts?
Who would like to take that question?
Can I
Sure.
take the opportunity? Yes. I think Sanat, as he already mentioned, how the Ministry of Education and the NIE, we are trying to, or we are doing our best to assure sustainability of these kind of interventions. Now, as I have mentioned, in our Ministry of Education and the NI, right, in our future programs, teacher education and teacher development is going to be very vital. That's going to be a vital component. So we will have to sit together and have a very good plan. Right at the moment, we are doing it every week. We are meeting at the NIE or at the Ministry of Education, especially with the vision of the new government and His Excellency the President. Teacher development and teacher education is going to be a very important aspect of the entire education system. So I'm sure that we can think of strategies to ascertain sustainability of all these efforts. Sanat?
Yeah, I saw the question raised by Sajani. Yeah, uh, now we always talk about this sustainability, that how we need to bring sustainability to our system. Now, so far, our experience is when we transfer things to the system. For example, we bring new methodologies, new visions, new technologies. They transfer to the system, and with the time, we observe that it doesn't go like as we expect. So there are certain, there are a lot of research done that what has happened in the system, then a lot of ideas are there. But anyway, what we feel is it is from the system that should keep more practice, more attitude to sustain what we give to the system from the policy level. So now there is a suggestion for the new curriculum reforms. I think Darshana, we were there last week when we had that suggestions from the minister and Dr. Sedara. So there will be new things coming in. I think there is a lot of hopes and support will be there. So only what we expect from our teacher card and the ISA card plus the trainer card is that be very robust in the system and have your vigor and go forward with what we are already given, right? Then the sustainability will be definitely there. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We don't have any more questions. So I'm going to hand over to Manrali, who's going to introduce. Is she there?
Yes, I am. So we asked a variety of participants on the project what the experience meant for them. And here are some of the participants on ITESL island-wide. Here are some comments from them.
I'm Manik Vavegama, attached to Mahavan National College of Education, and I see a lot of benefits of this ITESL program. And we saw how our colleagues and also the colleagues of other colleges and in other institutions, the teacher community, how they started developing their skills, knowledge and attitudes in teaching English in Sri Lanka. I consider it's a very, very great opportunity given to us. And also I saw there's an improvement and a connection between the managerial level at different layers, like the Ministry of Education, British Council, and other institutions getting together and working for this large project. And also the practitioners like the ISAs, the teacher educators, and also directors of English, and everybody came into one platform and started sharing their knowledge. And I really like it. And we can see the impact of it with our student teachers, and also it has flown down, cascaded down to the school.
I'm Thanusha Michael, attached to the Ministry of Education, and I'm really proud to have been a part of this ITESL program, where I regard this as one of the huge milestones in my CPD continuum, where I learned a lot and developed myself when it comes to, for example, giving feedback to teachers, the sandwich, we talk about positive and then points to improve, and then the positive points of things like that improve me a lot. How I look at my teachers, how I help them, how I mentor them. So I believe ITESL teaches a lot. One example is last year, the O-level results. Sri Lanka overall it is 62.36, whereas in the previous year it was 54. So this huge increase shows how ITESL has impacted our lives.
I'm Sri Vadani from Zonal Education Office, Denmarati. Really, it's a very wonderful opportunity to me to recall about the ITESL program. The ITESL program has a very valuable impact in various places. The various places mean in classroom. Even the lower level children are very, very much motivated about the maximizing participation and the stopping signals. And in the teachers' case, before that, the teachers are refused to plan the lesson. Nowadays, they are very much interested to write the notes of lesson and planning session. They want and everything look at about positive. In my case, in the feedback session, I always provide the opportunity to teachers to recall their lessons about the view and that lack about that everything. I provide the chance for them to recall that. This is a very good opportunity from the ITESL.
I'm Rohan from Pasdumrata College of Education. So the most interesting thing I see about ITESL program is the techniques and strategies we learned, because I see a change in the classroom practice of my own colleagues. Even the oldest colleagues who are on the verge of retirement now have changed their style of delivery in the classroom. the other most important thing I see is that this has trickled down to our student teachers. When you go to schools with our student teachers, we can see that they have picked up the techniques and strategies used by us, and they are practicing them in their lessons. So that made a huge change in teacher education, and thank you, ITESL.
I'm Sajjan from the Ministry of Education. I would like to speak about my experience on how it ran in the side of ministry. Because we had 3 programs running at the same time, one at Mana and one at Peradeniya and one at Yakaravatta. Later on, Mana was shifted to Pastunrata. And so we had to fight with clock, against clock to run the programs. That was a hard time anyway. But anyway, we can see how fruitful it is because it has benefited the whole education system in the sense, the English education system. There's a drastic change, and you can see the impact by going through the Deborah's impact evaluation report. I invite you to read it. Thank you.
I'm Geeti Varapitiya from the Zonal Education Office, Gampala. ITESL is one of the best courses I followed and delivered. Especially in the central province of Sri Lanka, a large number of English teachers benefited from ITESL. They had difficulties in teaching some competencies and planning lessons. This course helped them immensely to improve their knowledge and lessons. Now they say they enjoy teaching those particular competencies, the same hard lessons. Most of all, our learners feel these changes and enjoy the techniques the teachers use in their lessons. Thank you.
Okay, stopped a bit abruptly. Okay, thank you. I'd just like to conclude this launch by saying that teacher education has never been so important. The impact of COVID-19 and its consequences are immeasurable. Strengthening teacher education is one way of helping develop skills in the young people who will take the society forward. So thank you to the panel, Darshana, Sanat, Deborah, and to Louise for the introduction. Thank you very much to the audience, to all of you who have joined us today, to the stakeholders in the project, to the British Council team and all the training consultants who were involved in the project, and all the Sri Lankan teachers and trainers whose hard work contributed and continues to contribute to the project. Just to say, the recording of this will be on our British Council website early next week. The report will be on the website on Monday. It's not quite there yet, but it will be by Monday. So please do download it. You can download it for free. It's very detailed. If you want to get a certificate of participation, please complete the feedback quiz, which is in your comments box. The link is in the comments. And we will get you a certificate. Thank you very much. Goodbye and have a great weekend. Bye.